ellos. Aquí lo que nos hemos dado cuenta es que el mensaje es importante. Vemos que cuando hablaban del socialismo, de los cierres por la pandemia, de las vidas negras, los electores, esto fue algo que sí penetró a los hispanos de aquí, de Miami-Dade, porque cambiaron los porcentajes. Vimos que fue una batalla bien difícil aquí en Miami-Dade. When we talk about messaging and what penetrated in different spaces, when we saw the attacks on socialism, the messaging about Democrats wanting to shut things down and Black Lives Matter, although that did not work for all voters, it definitely had an impact with Hispanics in Miami. Aquí cuando la campaña empezó, no había, los republicanos siguieron también registrando votantes. Eso fue algo que nos impactó. Y cuando ya decidieron que iban a hacer campaña en el suelo, el ground game, vimos que todavía no teníamos la infraestructura para poder hacerlo. Y otra cosa que aprendimos es que muchas de las encuestas que hicieron aquí nos tenían ganando por puntajes que no fueron reales cuando vimos los resultados. Así que hay un problema grave con las encuestas y la información que estamos recibiendo con las encuestas aquí en Miami. Es una anomalía, como lo dije antes, porque no otras partes de la nación y de este estado también no reaccionaron de esta misma forma. Some of the things that we understand also is that the Republican Party they continued to register voters even during the pandemic. And they also had a better ground game because of it, because they were already, doing things on the ground. And as the Democrats, we reacted a little bit too late. But one of the other things that we were able to realize is that the polling here for us was very off. I mean, we had wins by 15 points. We had wins with much greater numbers than that. And when we see the results, we see how we lost congressional races, state Senate seats, state representative seats, and the margins were flipped the other way. And so something is going on with the polling that we're having here, because there were too many races that we lost. And so we know that is a problem, for us to be completely on opposite ends of what the results were with the polling. And that's what I got for you guys. Y esa es esa es la versión mía de lo que sucedió aquí en Miami-Dade. Y creo que es algo muy importante saber cómo poder hablar con los hispanos, particularmente la demográfica que tenemos aquí en Miami-Dade, porque sabemos que es bastante diferente que otras partes del país. Thank you all. That is my version of what happened here in Miami, and particularly what happened with the demographics that we have here in Miami-Dade.
Thank you, Carla, and thank you for being so upfront and on. We're, as our colleagues are seeing, we're really trying to learn and trying to do better and seeing what else we're going to be able to do over the course of the next couple of years. We have a very big, one last major way of dealing with Florida, and that's the gubernatorial races in 2 years from now. And we're going to have to figure out what we do and start now. In some ways, just like what has happened, and I want to get to Jerry and to David, but just like what has happened in terms of Colorado and Virginia, unlike most places in the world, we are the federalism of our Constitution is very deeply ingrained in America. There are certain things that are reserved nationally, and there are certain things that are very much state-based. But what we've seen is both Virginia and Colorado that were very much, purple, meaning, swing states a few years ago are now not, and you saw that in the results. But what we're seeing, and that's why I want to just have Jerry first and then David, in that 3 states that have always made up of who the Democratic Party is, working class party focused on bringing people together, or at least in the modern generations, I would say. The Democratic Party was not like this before 1960, before the mid 60s, but bringing people together racially, but with an eye towards working class issues and how to lift working class to a middle class. And that really got distorted in the 16 election. And with the work that Jerry Jordan from Philadelphia in Philadelphia has done, and David Hecker, our state leader in Michigan, you're seeing that change again. And so first Jerry and then David, and then we'll take questions. Jerry, you're still muted. So Barbara, can you unmute Jerry? Can we help Jerry unmute? Ah, there it is, Jerry. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Randy. And good afternoon, everyone. Here in Pennsylvania, and specifically, I'm talking about Philadelphia, which is on the eastern side of the state, and Allegheny County, which is on the western side of the state where Pittsburgh is, that the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania focused on those two areas a lot. And what they did is that they focused on Philadelphia, and we have four surrounding counties, and also on Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh and the suburbs of Pittsburgh. And they worked to increase the youth vote, which is normally low. And they did it by working with unions and community groups, the clergy, and so many others. And they organized and worked with a number of people who they identified as independents. And they, people who just did not like Trump. Many of them were Republicans. They organized Black women. And Black women, as Regina pointed out, have done a Herculean job in the Democratic Party. And this election was the first time in Pennsylvania that the legislature passed a law that allowed no excuse mail voting. And more than 2.5 million voters used that method of voting amid the pandemic. And it was something that was really well received. And there were a number of places that were called, had drop boxes where a person could go and put their mail-in ballot in a mail slot, and it would be counted. That was one of the reasons why our election results took so long, because the law also did not allow the election officials to open those ballots until the election was finished. And we had people who volunteered and did so much work. We had the support, and I thank you, Randy, for the support for this state of Pennsylvania. Over a year ago, you called it and you said Pennsylvania is going to be the state that is going to be the hot state this election, and it indeed was. But our members of the AFT canvassed, and they went door to door. They made phone calls. They sent mailings to our members' homes, but also were involved with working with the party and the community in order to get the votes out. I don't think that anyone should minimize the impact of having Kamala Harris running as vice president on the ticket with Joe Biden had. For African Americans, for Asians, we have Jamaicans here in the city of Philadelphia, Haitians. We took pride in having Kamala Harris on the ticket. And Kamala Harris went to a historically Black university, Howard University in Washington, D.C. And there she joined a sorority, the AKA sorority. And those are women who are all over the country, and there are AKA chapters all over the country. And the AKAs, along with all of the other 9 Greek organizations, came together and used that network of literally thousands of people, men and women, from fraternities and sororities, to push out the vote for Kamala Harris. And they made substantial contributions as well. Also, a connection to the Black community was very, very evident and discussed because of the killing of a man in Minnesota. And a week before the election, the police shot Walter Wallace Jr. here in Philadelphia, and a neighbor taped the incident. And when I saw it, I couldn't help but be very, very moved. And there was a lot of tension and unrest here in the city, but it galvanized people of color to go to the polls because they wanted to vote. And especially here in Philadelphia, we happen to have a ballot question on police, dealing with police and how they're going to be dealt with if they commit crimes such as shooting citizens. So people went to the polls because they were interested in that. The Trump campaign is challenging the voter results here in Pennsylvania. And he has said that many of the ballots, the mail-in ballots that were counted after the polls closed should be tossed. Well, even if that happens, the number of ballots is 10,000 votes that he's talking about, 10,000 ballots. However, if those are tossed out, Biden will still carry Pennsylvania and will win it because he won Pennsylvania with 50,000 votes. And so therefore, if you take the 10 and the courts say they're going to be tossed out, President-elect Biden will still be the winner. And I'll stop here and I will throw it to David.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. And thank you for your great work in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And thank you to our international sisters and brothers for your moral support during this election season. Michigan's a pretty purple state. We've been trading off governors for a while now. And if you go up and down the ticket, we're a pretty purple state. Having said that, when we lost to Donald Trump in 2016 by less than 11,000 votes, it was the first time that the state did not support the Democratic candidate since 1988. So this year, as you know, we did carry the state for Biden-Harris. We were able to reelect in an extremely tough fight that the Republican has not conceded yet, our United States Senator Gary Peters. We elect our state Supreme Court here in Michigan, and it was 4-3 Republican, and we flipped it 4-3 Democrat. There are some other races we were not successful in, but we had a pretty good day, as the sampling of races indicate. We had record turnout, as the country did. We had over 5.5 million people voted. We had 70% turnout, which was the largest percentage turnout we've had since John Kennedy, since 1960. In 16, by comparison, the turnout was 64%. So that 6 percentage points, 15% increase, but 6 percentage point increase was significant. We actually improved for President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris in a number of different areas in Michigan. In Wayne County is the biggest county. It is the home of the city of Detroit. City of Detroit is 80% approximately African American. You know, our numbers increased well in Wayne County. Our numbers increased in the suburban county I live in, Oakland County, which when I moved here a long time ago was a solid Republican county. And now we actually control, not only did we win it for Obama and Clinton and Biden, we also carried countywide officers. But a chunk of the reason Oakland County is going Democratic is because of the number of people who have moved here from Detroit. And a good number of those people are the African-American base. But we also, there are places where we lost by less, which in a lot of ways is almost as important as the places we win. Another suburban county here in Michigan, suburban to Detroit, which you may have heard about because it's been written about forever, is Macomb County. And, you know, back in the day was the home of the so-called Reagan Democrats. It's a pretty white working class community. And, you know, I spent a lot of time there campaigning. And, you know, I have a Biden lawn sign in front of my house. They had, you know, Trump flags. They had Trump signs the size of the Biden sign we had in front of our AFT Michigan office, which is on a major street in Detroit. I mean, they love this man. Hard for us to fathom, but they love this man. But Joe Biden has more appeal to white working class than Hillary Clinton. I think we could all figure out the reasons why. So we lost Macomb by less, which was significant. But we picked up in a number of different demographics in a number of different parts of the states, including rural Michigan. Why we had a better outcome this time than in 16? Well, first we need to go back 2 years. And in 2018, we passed a ballot proposal which provided for no reason absentee voting. So in essence, that's the same as early voting. Before that, you had to give a specific reason why you wouldn't be at the polls on election day to get an absentee ballot. So that was significant. The other significant part is for years we had straight party voting. You could check one box and vote for every Democrat or check one box and vote for every Republican. We lost that, but we won it back with the same ballot question 2 years ago. So that was significant in helping set the stage for 2020. An awful lot of the Biden-Harris vote was an anti-Trump vote. I think sort of unfair to Biden and Harris because it sort of didn't hide, but sort of hid, you know, how positive they are and their platform. But we have to recognize an awful lot of that vote was an anti-Trump vote, either for his policy, his behavior, et cetera. And because of that, there was probably a broader coalition than we've ever had before. So people, you know, on the more conservative end of things who had just found Trump abhorrent, people on the left who sometimes criticized the Democratic Party for not being progressive enough in their eyes. That all didn't matter. Everybody coalesced to get rid of Trump. A third reason is even in COVID, the Biden campaign in Michigan ran a much better campaign than the Clinton people did. Clinton took Michigan for granted. She came in here once. President-elect Biden was here a number of times. Senator Harris was here a number of times, extremely important for reasons other people mentioned, and their surrogates were here a great deal of the time. So I think those were all important factors as to why the state changed. Just in conclusion, going forward, you know, as Randy said, we're two countries. The Trump support in Michigan is extremely strong. It's extremely emotional. You know, I mentioned the sign anecdotal example, but I think that says a lot. People weren't satisfied with a little lawn sign. They really wanted to brag and shout. We have to take that into consideration. On the positive end, we have to make sure we build on that coalition that came together, even if it came together for anti-Trump reasons, as much, if not more, than pro-Biden-Harris reasons. We need to take advantage and build on that. Another key part I'll just close with, you know, Jerry thanked Randy, but one thing the AFT did with Randy's leadership is had people in blue states around the country where it was a foregone conclusion that Biden-Harris were going to win, calling in to Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and texting in and coming in. So it was a real, and, you know, Randy kindly, you know, says nice things about Jerry and myself and others and the work we did, but winning in these states was really a national effort. So thank you.
And thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Carla, and thank you, Regina, and thank you, Jeff. I know we're running late, but I want to see if rarely get this opportunity. I want to see if we can go about 10 more minutes and get a couple of the questions that I think Rob has been curating already. And I think that the first one was from Gwenna. And
that's correct.
Rob, why don't you actually curate the questions instead of me? And
yeah.
You know, I cannot wait till we all get back together again. Although, look, Zoom allows us to have more international meetings and connections. So, you know, this has been amazing to be able to do this quickly. But why don't we ask, because I would like Regina and Jeff comment on McGuenna's question, but why don't we have McGuenna?
McGuenna, could you ask, McGuenna from South Africa, could you, Satu, could you ask your question, McGuenna?
Yep, thank you so much. And greetings to all. Wendy, my friend, you did say that when we say this is the most important election of our lifetime, we mean it.
Yeah.
But you also toured the United States by bus for a month, talking to the working people and encouraging them to get out and vote like their future depends on it, because it does. That's what you said. The people of the United States have now spoken, and congratulations to the AFT and all the trade union movement, because democracy has won. Our question, coming from the history of racism in our country, is how will the AFT deal with the systemic racism, and in particular, the Trumpism? Thank you.
So I think, Regina, would you actually just kind of comment a bit on what we are doing? But Jeff, I think if you could dig down in terms of that result that you saw, I think it's important, because you cannot fight something unless you understand it. So Jeff, could you kind of, to the extent that you have any more details in terms of, like, on a horizon, what you saw in your polling from, you know, the first month after what happened with George Floyd to what happened near the end? It would be interesting for you to kind of give us some of that, kind of what you've seen in terms of the public. And then Regina to finish the answer.
Sure. You know, the killing of George Floyd was a shock to the system. It put the question of police abuse and racial justice at the top of the radar screen for many Americans. Over time, that was pretty durable with progressive voters, but as time went on and President Trump tried to stir the pot on this, on his side of the electorate, he really tried to make this about violence and looting, and we saw increasingly that that his supporters were accepting that view of the world. So, in this, as I was describing much earlier, in this sort of very kind of, stark dichotomy between what Trump voters believe and what Biden voters believe, we asked people,
well, which is the greatest problem in America today? Racial injustice and police killing innocent African Americans, or looting and rioting going on in our cities. And overwhelmingly, by these kind of 10-to-1, 9-to-1 margins, Biden voters would say that the kind of real challenge is racial injustice. And for Trump voters, they increasingly thought about this as about looting and violence and buying Trump's view of the world, and part of the way he kind of stimulated turnout on his side. This really has kind of an education component to it, by the way. I mentioned the finding earlier about preserving America's history, values, and culture. One of the ways that it gets brought to bear in American politics is the question of the statues that were erected during the period of massive resistance to honoring Confederate generals and Confederate leaders, and whether they should stay or remain. That really is kind of surprisingly an emotional flashpoint for a lot of Trump voters. And the question, one of the questions at the heart of how people think about America is, is that slavery is being part of what our country was founded on, and kind of the enduring legacy of that. And President Trump really took this on as well and said, well, I'm going to have an American patriotic curriculum for our schools. So that is not about that doesn't talk about slavery as being kind of part of the origin story, but really his version of patriotism. So it's not that in addition to this just being present organically in what many people are thinking and feeling, what is different about Trump from any president that came before, closest would be Richard Nixon, or in modern history, is his willingness to sort of rub this raw, to do these, make these appeals, these very direct appeals to race and racism, and cross boundaries that no other president previously has been ever willing to come close to. And it's a very ugly part of, I think, President Trump's legacy.
Yes, I think we at the AFT, Narendi's leadership, are doing a lot of things. We have a staff, Black Caucus, that is discussing with us some of their issues, and we are beginning to look internally, even before we go externally. We've convened a committee that is looking at school, police in school, and how we can deal with that, change the language. We are not saying remove all police because they just need to be removed, but we do understand that we need to look at the whole student. We need to look at the trauma enforced in them. We need to look at the nutritional program, which we are working on. We need to look at counseling and the like. And in addition to that, we are, as the Human and Civil Rights Committee, is working with our partners to address some of the issues that appear within our school systems, as well as when our children and their parents are in communities as a whole. It is very challenging what we must do and what we have to do. But under Randy's leadership, she has given us the leadway along with Fed and Evelyn. If you can see, we have a very diverse leadership. And so within that leadership, we have the ability to move throughout communities to listen. I think that's one great thing too. Randy convened a meeting in Minnesota with the teachers. She listened to them. We cried together. And we're looking at one of the teachers. We're funding one of the teachers to be a part of community. So we're taking her out of the classroom, though she will still be connected, but looking at the George Floyd issue as it impacts our school systems. And so that is but a small snippet of what we are doing, and encouraged by those things that you are doing internationally, and would love to understand, particularly in South Africa, how you continue to manage the situation so that we can get some good pointers from you. But I remind my colleagues every day, I wake up Black every day. There's nothing I can do about it. I am challenged. I was Black before my mother knew that I was a girl. And it is very challenging, but I think we are working on it in community with some of our allies.
Thank you, Regina. I know that we're getting close to the deadline, but there's 3 questions that were presented that were pre-presented. So I think that if we can get through the others, Rob, that would be great. And we'll go through to 1:30.
Okay. The next question, John McGowan from Ireland. John?
Hello, Rob. Hello, Randy, colleagues. And first and foremost, congratulations on what is a very significant and an absolutely necessary victory. Whatever may ensue, it at least ensues from a better place as a consequence of the election. I know that you have put enormous effort into this election, and perhaps we're more on tenterhooks as a consequence of this, or about the consequence of this, than any previous election. But I suppose, look, borrowing slightly from the Irish experience, and I noticed that Mr. Garrett mentioned the extent, and you did as well, Randy, the extent to which America is polarized. And I think it was described by one or other of you as sort of having retreated to a type of tribalism. Now, we have seen, to our very great cost, the consequence of tribalism in Ireland. And it's not pretty. It's extraordinarily long-lived, and it leaves a legacy that is extraordinarily long-lived and painful. And I suppose, therefore, my question is about what happens next. Specifically, having won this election, it's now imperative that the next presidential election also be won, because 4 years is not enough, obviously, to, if you like, undo damage that has been done and is being done by Trump and his associates. And in that context, it's probably unsustainable in the longer term, notwithstanding that demographics may be moving things in the direction of the Democratic Party. It's not really sustainable societally to have 70 million voters who default to somebody like Trump. So what, therefore, can be done between now and the next election by way of policy platforms to dislodge those people who can be dislodged from Trump's cohort? I mean, it is an economic stimulus package that involves large infrastructural work, something that crosses state boundaries, that reaches all parts of the country. Is that possible? And would that be supported, for example, on a bipartisan basis where you have divided politics and possibly, probably, I would imagine, the Senate against you?
Well, one thing I would say about that, it's a very important point. When we did this poll that kind of really tried to plumb this tribalism among American voters, the only thing we found that really helped bridge that were economic, kind of a progressive economic program that would make sure people have secure jobs and good incomes and could provide a good life and future for their families. So being able to have that kind of an economic program, I think, is I think, our one best hope for trying to bridge some of the divide that I talked about previously.
People, and I don't know if Jeff, I've been playing with this for the last few days since I'm about to do a column in the New York Times on Sunday. People have to feel safe, and they have to feel like the generations. One of the things that happens in America is there's this sense that our kids are going to do better than we do. And this goes back to what Jeff just said about economics. There's a sense that there's a hopeful and a better future ahead of us than behind us. And it needs to be that kind of economic message. We've gone off of before COVID, a very long period of time, macroeconomic success, where you still have 40% of people in America not being able to put $400 together in an emergency. It's become a very oligarchical structure and very unequal in terms of America. And I do think that Jeff is right. If there's a way of a labor resurgence and an ability to actually lift economic boats, it will create a trust, and that can transcend some of the identity issues. But we're also going to have to think through how schools can help in this kind of way to offset what is, remember, for a long time in terms of schooling, we've been very focused on, standardized, what gets measured by standardized tests, as opposed to how to really deal with holistic education that deeply respects all children. So it's a big question you asked, John, and we're going to have to spend some time, again, looking at what has happened in Ireland. We're going to be able to gain some lessons for that. I know Hand in Hand is on the call too. We're going to have to think about the lessons. There is deep hurt and deep agony. I am very much, and I hope I don't embarrass her, Regina taught me a lot about deeply listening in a way that people see that you are, that it is real. But autocrats deeply divide, which is what Trump has done. And there's a lot of work. We need to recognize it. And then there's a lot of work we need to do about it. Rob, any more questions? I think we have time for one more.
One more? Okay. Our great colleague from Brazil, Fatima, has a question.
Gracias. Que bien nos encontrar acá con vida, enquanto muitos de los nuestros se partiram em função da pandemia. Randy, em tu nome, dar graças e saudar a todos os afiliados de AFT por este belíssimo trabalho no sentido de restabelecer a democracia e sacar de los líderes nefastos del mundo, que é Trump, enquanto dirigente de país tão importante como Estados Unidos. Vivemos a esperança que em 2022 podamos fazer o mesmo em Brasil, sacando a Bolsonaro, que será líder nefasto a menos. Pero já queremos pensar e falar sobre depois do 20 de enero, porque temos certeza que todo vai passar bem e que Biden vai estar como presidente. ¿Qué podemos esperar de la política internacional por parte de América Latina, del próximo gobierno, del gobierno de Biden, no sentido del medio ambiente y también en las intervenciones en los países de América Latina? ¿Qué gobierno va a hacer para América Latina en estos dos aspectos, Biden? Gracias.
So that's a big question to end on. I think what you're going to see with the Biden administration is a return to an America that believes that we have a problem-solving role, that it is not this America First ideology, but there has to be an acknowledgement of the kind of what is patriotism, what is America's role in the world. I think America's role in the world is not going to all of a sudden go back to what it was January 19th, 2017. I think there's going to have to be a lot of humility. But Biden and whoever he picks as Secretary of State going to have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust. It's interesting that your president is one of the few, obviously, who has not congratulated him. But there will be a difference, obviously, in terms of a refocus on we're all in it together internationally, a refocus on human rights. All of that stuff will be very, very different. In terms of domestic issues, there will be, regardless of what happens in terms of the Senate, there will be a whole lot of executive orders that undoes some of the divisive undermining of human rights that Trump has done, including on the issue of the Muslim ban, on issues around trans kids. I mean, we'll go DACA, on and on. But long term, whether it's one of these very big moments of progressivism is going to very much depend on who is in the Senate and what kind of campaigns are ultimately going to be waged over the course of these 2 years. So it's a lot of, we'll be back to focusing on human rights and have that kind of moral outlook and think about the world as one. And Biden has done a lot of good work in terms of climate issues. We'll get back into the Paris Climate Treaty, but there's a lot to be done in activism of how we bring the country together in terms of ensuring that we don't keep having these such bruising, immobilizing battles that nothing gets done. So I want to just say to everybody, thank you. Thank you very, very, very much for joining us. Thank you, Pat, for putting this together. Thank you, Jeff. I know that your time is really limited right now, and I really appreciate you being with us. Thank you, Regina and Carla and Jerry and David for your interventions. And I also want to say, as Marlise is waving, I want to end by basically saying, we really, 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 really appreciate all of the community that has been created amongst and between us for all of this time. Our international meetings, our learning from what has happened in other places has been very helpful, but it's also the solidarity and the unity and the sense that light is found and light is there, and we just need to find ways to find it. So this is a moment of, I agree with Jeff, that democracy and the good guys won, but we need to make sure it's not fleeting, and we have to understand what to do to recreate the sense that the human endeavor, that we're all in it together, as opposed to the tribalism that we have in the United States. But thankfully, more people voted this time than ever before, and more voted for democracy and hope and fairness and justice and freedom. And that is really, 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 really good news, and a good news story about America right now. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.